My name is Shelby. My late husband Antonio was the best thing that ever happened to me. Long story short, he passed away in a motorcycle accident exactly 8 years ago as I'm writing this, April 29th, 2016. What I'm about to tell you is something I've blocked out of my mind since it happened, but I think I'm finally ready to open up about it. Anyway, Antonio and I both grew up in Italy. English is actually my second language. He always dreamed of traveling to Greece, but we kept postponing the trip. One of my biggest regrets was not taking time off work one summer to go with him. In late spring of 2018, I decided to bite the bullet and take the trip he had always talked about. Being only 36 years old with no children, I didn't too much like the prospect of traveling alone, so I decided to book a cruise, thinking it would be more relaxing. I was actually in luck. Celebrity Cruise Line had a Best of Greece cruise that covered 6 cities: Athens, Santorini, Ephesus, Mykonos, Volos, Thessaloniki, and back to Athens. I tried my best to be excited about the cruise, knowing it was what he would have wanted, but I couldn't help but find the whole thing somewhat melancholy. It just felt wrong to be there without him. Admittedly, I may have gotten a little too wine drunk the first night after leaving Athens, but I felt I was entitled to behave less prudently. After exiting the boat and enjoying the city's offerings, I found myself drinking endless martini after martini at some nameless bar. That's when I noticed him across the bar. There was some 40-year-old looking man with long, straight brown hair and an unkempt beard. He wasn't bad looking actually, but his stare was unsettling. At first, I brushed it off as the wandering gaze of some lonely guy. Maybe he found me attractive. I wasn't going to get offended if he wanted to look at me. After catching his eye a few more times though, I started feeling unease begin to set in. The way he was glaring at me was just so perturbing. It wasn't seductive or charming like he was trying to flirt or anything like that. It was literally as if he were trying to sear a hole in my face with his eyes. I finished what must have been my 8th drink, paid my tab, and quickly made my way back to the dock. By that night, my memory of that man had completely dissipated. The next city on the docket was Ephesus. My time there was essentially spent the same way, consuming far more alcohol than was acceptable for a woman my age. Other than some fleeting guilt, everything went well in Ephesus. Mykonos was next. I'm sure it won't come as a surprise to any of you at this point. Near the end of the day, I unavoidably found myself sitting alone at an outdoor bar, and that's when I noticed him. There was a man standing against a light fixture with his arms crossed. I strained my eyes, thinking my mind must have been playing a trick on me. It was unmistakable though. It was the guy from Santorini. He was too far away for me to tell whether he was looking at me, but his head was tilted in my direction. Oddly, he was wearing the same exact outfit he had worn in Santorini. A wave of discomfort washed over me. Was I being stalked? My palms began feeling clammy, so I nervously rubbed them on my dress as I lowered my head, trying to avoid looking in his direction. I could feel his aura radiating though, even from that far away. I couldn't help myself. I glanced back up, but he was gone. You might expect my body to have flushed with relief, but I was actually even more anxious. I frantically began looking around, trying to see if he had gotten closer. I didn't feel comfortable walking back to the boat alone, so I ran into a couple that was leaving and made some small talk, then walked back with them. That night, instead of retiring to my stateroom, I decided to explore the boat in hopes of running into that strange man. After scouring the boat in its entirety, I gave up around midnight. The next morning, I got off the boat in Volos, determined to solve this mystery. Instead of venturing into the city, I opted to wait at the gangway. I watched painfully for an inordinate amount of time as person after person made their way off the ship. I didn't miss a single one, but he wasn't one of them. Frustrated, I returned to the ship and spent the rest of the day by the pool. Thessaloniki was the last city. As much as I dreaded it, I had to reconcile the fact that I'd be wasting my vacation if I stayed on the boat. So reluctantly, I got off the ship and tried to enjoy the city. Feeling superstitious, I thought it might be best to avoid bars and alcohol this time around, which I did. Instead, I wandered the streets aimlessly, admiring the architecture and enjoying the weather. And then, as if on cue, there he was again. He was a few streets down in the middle of the road, with his arms at his sides. Instead of being afraid, I felt a huge rush of adrenaline-induced confidence start to pour in. I yelled out to him and began walking in his direction. Instead of acknowledging me, he actually turned and ran. It was bizarre. He turned a corner, and I chased after him. I made it to the corner and barely saw him run down another street, and I sprinted to follow him. I turned the same corner, and he had disappeared. Nowhere to be seen, like he had evaporated out of existence. I couldn't sleep that night. I was relieved when the ship pulled into Athens, but once I made it back home, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling of that man that was weighing on my mind. I whipped out my laptop and started doing research. I wasn't quite sure what to even look for, but I thought recent police reports were a decent place to start. After having no luck, I stumbled upon some missing persons advertisements. I scrolled through page after page, and then I found something. There, in the middle of the page, was a missing person ad for a guy who looked almost identical to the guy who had been following me. I stared, frozen in shock. What was even more disturbing, though, was his name. He had the same first name as my Antonio, which was a cruel coincidence. The very first thing I did was call the police and report my sightings. The operator thanked me for my assistance and put me on hold. A few minutes later, she asked me if I was 100% confident in what I had seen. I told her yes. After an uncomfortable pause, she went on to say that they had actually closed that man's case just over a month ago. Apparently, he had been found dead in a boating accident off the coast of Parga, Greece. What's more sinister, though, is the date of his confirmed death was the exact month and day of my husband's passing, just 2 years later. I hung up the phone, literally shivering. I don't think I've ever been more terrified than I was at that moment. I began feeling dizzy, questioning if maybe I was going crazy, like had I imagined everything. Suddenly, another wave of realization slapped me in the face. The only city I hadn't seen him in, Ephesus, was actually a city in Turkey, not Greece. I'm not a believer of the paranormal, but I've spent hours trying to rationalize my sightings, and no conclusion I reach makes sense. My niece Maria had her wedding in Athens last summer, though, so I had no choice. And like clockwork, there he was again. I only saw him for a split second this time, standing in that same outfit by the bar, head pointed in my direction. To be completely honest with you, there were so many drunk people there that I might have imagined it. Either way, I vowed to never step foot in Greece again. I'm a senior at Rowan University in South Jersey. My friends in the sorority Phi call me Devin. Last summer, I took a Bahamas cruise with some of my girlfriends to let off some steam. We had all just turned 21, so our goals for this vacation were to drink more, and have fun. We all felt like we deserved this vacation after such a grueling semester spent dealing with Greek life drama and schoolwork. Anyway, I'll keep things short. I was with my friends Talo, Messina, and Taylor. Taylor and I didn't always see eye to eye. There was some petty drama between the two of us. I always assumed she was jealous of me because she never spent any time in the gym and spent a lot of time eating. I think you can see what I'm getting at. Anyway, I was really close with Talo and Messina, so I figured things would be peachy. The cruise line we had booked was Carnival, and it would be going to a couple of Bahamas islands before returning to New York City. The boat pulled into literally the first destination, called Paradise Island. Long story short, all four of us were really wasted at the bar, laughing and flirting with guys so they'd buy us drinks. It was actually really fun. At one point, Messina asked me if I would grab her a drink, so I did. I went up to the bar, ordered the drinks, and waited. Messina followed me to grab hers. The drinks came out, but I really wanted to take a selfie with her before we went back to our table. I pulled out my phone and took a couple selfies with the drinks. Just then, Talo called Messina over, and being as drunk as she went bounding off without me, leaving her drink behind. I didn't want someone to steal her drink, so I put my phone on the bar and grabbed her drink with my other hand. With both drinks, I made my way to where they were sitting and made fun of Messina for being so forgetful. Pretty soon after that, we had to start making our way back towards the boat. The literal second the boat pulled away, I started frantically searching for my phone. I felt like such an idiot. I had left it at the bar. I started crying, knowing this would for sure ruin our trip. I wanted to jump overboard for losing my phone on the first day of the cruise. I pulled out my laptop to try and locate my phone's location. To my surprise, it wasn't on the island. but it was actually showing up as somewhere on the boat. It was hard to pinpoint exactly where its location was, but I was relieved to think that someone must have found it and returned it to the Lost and Found or something. I went up to Lost and Found, but they said no one had turned a phone in. Any relief I had was completely gone now. Why would someone take my phone if they weren't planning on returning it? I went back to my friends and cried about it again. Taylor told me not to worry about it, and that I should just try enjoying the trip as best I could. So that's what I did. I didn't think about it for a whole day, which I was really proud of. You never realize how much time you actually spend on your phone. I kept going to take selfies or check social media, only to realize I had no way of doing so. The next day, though, while I was in the very front of the boat, I pulled my laptop out of my bag to check my phone's location just out of curiosity. To my surprise, it was almost right on top of me. I started looking around, but there were so many people. Any one of them could have had my phone. I told my friends this, and they seemed as shocked as I was. All except Taylor. It looked like she was trying to hold back laughter. I started getting really annoyed when I noticed she found my situation funny. A few hours later, we found ourselves in the arcade at the back of the boat, messing around with the childish games and whatnot. Again, I pulled out my laptop, and once more, my phone's location was basically on top of me. Now I was furious. Whoever had my phone was following me around the boat. It had to be Taylor. That fatty thought this whole thing was a big joke. I confronted her, showing her proof on my laptop. She insisted that she had no idea what happened to my phone, and it wasn't her fault that I was so stupid that I couldn't keep track of it. We started yelling at each other, and I said some pretty mean things. I made her empty her pockets and her purse, which she reluctantly did. My phone wasn't anywhere in sight, though. She called me an idiot again, smirking to herself. I stormed off by myself, tears streaming down my face. I spent the rest of my day in my room and refused to do anything with Taylor for the rest of the night. The next 2 days went by really fast. I refused to hang out with Taylor the whole time, and instead spent both days by myself, randomly checking my phone's location out of desperation. When I got back to my room that night, I noticed something weird. There was an envelope lying on the ground, like someone had slipped it under the door. It was a handwritten letter. I started reading, and I felt disgusted. Some random guy named Bart Vakinski had supposedly found my phone unlocked, went through it, realized how attractive I was, and wanted to confess his love for me. The letter was really short, but I felt utterly grossed out. Some creep had full access to my phone and knew what room I was staying in. I wanted to cry. I reported this to the crew's security team, hoping they'd be able to do something about it. Unfortunately, they were useless. The good news was that loser Bart didn't try to contact me again, and the cruise ended. Taylor and I made up, and the four of us parted ways. I wish I could tell you the story ended there, though. That same night, after my dad drove me home, I was up late watching reality TV on my laptop. That's when it hit me. Why not check my phone's location now? I was kicking myself for not having thought about that sooner. I pulled it up and waited for it to load. I stared in shock as I realized the little blue dot was showing up right on top of my house. My blood ran cold. I screamed, waking my family up. My dad burst into my room, realized what was going on, and sprinted outside in his bare feet, brandishing his hunting rifle. I followed close behind. My dad fired a shot into the air and screamed at the top of his lungs. And just then, some guy jumped our side gate and sprinted down the street. My dad hesitated before deciding not to follow him. I was mortified. My dad and I made our way around back, and the scene was horrific. One of my dad's backyard ladders was leaned up against the side of the house, directly underneath my bedroom window. Even more horrifying, though, was that little wooden latch above the window was almost completely cut through. Maybe a few more minutes, and he would have been able to open the window. I might not have been alive telling the story if I had gone to sleep instead of checking my location. We filed a police report, and it's been almost 2 weeks without an incident. I still have trouble sleeping at night, knowing that some creep has access to all of my information. All my pictures, my name, contacts, and address. My phone has been deactivated, but I can only imagine what kind of data he was able to keep. I'll update if something else happens.